suitcases back home.
I'll say that again.
Now,
Shmuel
yes.
Aleph, Perek Yud Daled, 14, Pasuk Chaf Daled, 24. Let's remind ourselves that Yonatan and his armor bearer ambushed the Plishtim, began a rout. He killed almost 20 people by himself. The Plishtim started running away, and the Bnei Israel are chasing after the Plishtim. They have not destroyed the Plishtim yet. But there was a great Yeshua, like it says in Pasuk Chav Gimel. Vayoshasha vayamu et Yisrael v'melchama v'ataven. Hashem brought a big Yeshua based on the huge army that the Plishtim had brought. Hashem was fighting on their behalf. Pasuk Chav Daled. V'ish Yisrael nigash bayomahu. It was a hard day for them. Rashi says, there's a lot of pressure on them. Vayoel Shaul et ha'am. We'll see what the word Vayoel means. He made them take an oath. Lemor. We'll see what Lemor adds. Arur ha'ish. Cursed will be the person. Asher yochal lechem ad ha'erev. They should not eat any bread. Rashi says, Kol Michael b'mashma, means no any food until nightfall. V'nikamti mi'oivai v'lot, and this will help us take revenge against our enemies. V'lotam kolam lachem, and the people followed along. Now,
Who is Ish Yisrael?
it refers all the Jews that were hiding and then came out of their hiding place to start attacking Plishtim. And Shaul, now, he didn't want them busy preparing food. He wanted them fighting. The Malbim explains like this. Hatam sha'asa shol ken lashbiasam elachol, to eat. Why did he make them take an oath not to eat? Once they chased the Plishtim as far away as this Beis Aven, the Jews stopped fighting. Like it says, Vamilchama Avra, V'chadlu milordof achrei tzareim. And they didn't pursue the Plishtim as much as Shaul wanted them. They wanted to rest. That's why Shaul, from the Lashon Allah, Vayoel is Aleph Lamed Hey, Alot are curses. Hishbiyam ba'Allah ba'yochlu lechem, leman yakum goya oivav, so that they would chase after them better. Now, the Malbim also says, Hasvara hayu misanim bayomahu, kimosh haya darkam b'chol eitz tzara. The Jewish army, when they went out to fight, they usually were fasting. Like we see when Yoshua, by Amalek, when Moshe Rabbeinu, their Chazal also say they were fasting. So now, after the Plishtim are running away, Mikra Din they could eat. However, Gazer Shaul Bal Yochlu Ki Oden Atshua Shlema. He wanted to wipe them all out. And the people followed. Now, why did Shaul need to make them take an oath? He's the Melech, right? They're supposed to listen to what he says. However, al divrei Melech chayv misa, because you're moired b'malchus. So why did he have to take an oath? So the Das Soifrim asked this question. and answers, the Ratzer Sholios Patuach Shlo Yoichla Filu B'Tzina, means if you're going to be Moired B'Machos, it's usually something you do publicly. But he didn't want people eating at all, even privately. So he added a klala. Not just, remember, if you're Moired B'Machos, you need to do it in front of Eidim, you're taken out and executed. He wasn't even, I don't want anybody eating, and therefore I want Shemaim to be on alert, even if they do it secretly. Now, when we use the word lamor, he meant shekol echad yomer lechaveiro v'yaskiru b'adashvish. Each person should tell the other person, don't forget we have a shvua, because he didn't want anybody to eat. That's why we'll see later on with Yonatan, this lamor is going to come into play. Some say that we know that it was considered a chet for Shaul that he didn't wait for the Navi, right? So he thought that this would be a kapara with the tzom for that issue as well. Pasuk Chafei, v'chol haaretz ba'u bayar. They all came to the forest. Vahidvash al pnei hasadeh. And there was honey on the meadow. Rashi says, Dvash kanim gadil be'eretz Yisrael. This is sugar cane, right? This is sugar from reeds, not normal honey that comes from bees. Rashi learns that it was sugar cane, and that's why it's called a forest. The Radak says, no, it was honey, it was like a beehive. And the honey was dripping from the beehive onto the ground. Pasuk Chavav. Vayavo amalayar. The Jewish people came into the forest. Vinei helech dvash, and there was honey there. But vein masig yado el piv. Nobody put any honey to their mouth. Ki yarei ha'am es hashvua. Everyone was afraid of the shvua that they took. Chav Zayin. The Yonatan lo shama bishbia aviv eta'am. Yonatan was not present when Shaul had the whole people take an oath. Therefore, Yonatan vaishlach ektzeh mateh asher biado. Yonatan took his staff, dipped it in the honey, vaibol oto bayaras advash, vayashev yado el piv, vatoarna einav. He put a little bit on his mouth, and his eyes lightened up.
Ernie, can I make a side comment? It's very interesting because it relates to the new publication of the Mizrahi magazine that talks about Davash, and
Yes.
it describes both the honey from bees and the honey from dates, and that traditionally in Eretz Yisrael was the honey from dates. Because interesting, because it's talking the same thing that the pasuk is talking here. There was a machlokes between Rashi and I don't know who you said, Radak or another Meforish, whether it was from a beehive or whether it was from dates or from like it said sugar cane.
Nobody here says dates at all. You're absolutely correct.
But just talking about the simanim of Rosh Hashanah, but when it talks about the Davash, it's specifically talking about Davash of dates, because that's what naturally grows, one of the 7 fruits in Eretz Yisrael. So
when it says
that's the plug for Yaham Mizrahi, that's all.
When it says Eretz Chitav Usara Gepenu Teinav Rimon Eretz Zeit Shemen Dvash, those are the 7 fruits. No question. There, Dvash refers to Tamar, refers to date honey. Rashi here does not say this was an orchard of dates. He says it was sugar cane, like we have in Hawaii, but apparently grew in Eretz Yisrael too. The Radak says, no, it was from bee honey that spilled on the ground. And it's interesting why they didn't, they could have just said it's also from dates, a lot of dates in Eretz Yisrael, but here it was not. Now, let's understand. The way the Meforshim learn, particularly the Malbim, Yonatan had sort of three excuses. That he did not hear the Shavua, therefore he's a shoygeg. And the pasuk just says he just put a little honey on the tip, and it was te'ima. He tasted. He didn't really eat. And it's a suffix if Shaul, because he used the word achila. Ha'isha asher yoichal lechem. And in halacha, there's a difference between eating and te'ima, just tasting. So for example, a cook who's just tasting something, you don't have to make a bracha necessarily on everything that you just put in your mouth to taste, because in order to make a bracha, you have to have a certain amount. There's a shear, etc. Now, then when it says that his eyes lit up, there's something called bulmus. Bulmus is when somebody is like literally dying of hunger. And that's the pikuach nefesh. And al pidin, you'd be allowed to eat. Like it says in Masechta Yuma, Misha also bulmus shemuter lechol b'yom kippur. You're allowed to eat. So let's keep those in mind because
What was the third?
yes.
What was this? The first one, he was away. The second one, he tasted but didn't eat. What's the third?
No, that it was pikuach nefesh. That the fact that the pasuk said his eyes lit up, the Meforshim want to say that he was suffering from this condition called bulmus, which is a pikuach nefesh, and you're allowed to eat.
Okay.
Now we're gonna learn that piece in Masechta Yuma, Pei Gimel. Misha achzu bulmus, whoever has this condition called bulmus, ma'achil noso dvash. You feed him right away honey, v'chol minei metika. Like think about someone who's hypoglycemic and he's about to faint. Shadvash v'chol minei metika me'irin me'oreinav shalada. These things will lighten up a person's eyes right away. V'aval pishein rai l'davar zeich l'davar. Because they quote this pasuk, Ru'una ki oru einai ki ta'anti ma'ad dvash hazeh. But the Gemara there clearly says, Hasam lav bulmus achzeh. There by Yonasan, he didn't have bulmus. The imaya came, later on, we're going to see Shaul is going to condemn Yonasan to death. And if they pikuach nefesh, you can't say that the melechs is going to be more, a command of a melech is more than a command of the Torah. And we know that every mitzvah of the Torah can be overridden because of pikuach nefesh. Pasuk Chav Ches. Vayan ish meha'am. So one of the people told Yehonatan, remember, because we said lay more. So this is, remember, one person's telling another person. And the person says to Yonatan, Hashbeh yishbi avicha tam lay more. Your father made us all take an oath. Arur ha'isha sheyochal lechem hayom vayafa'am. And the people were very tired. One pshat in this pasuk is the reason why the people are so tired is because they didn't eat. The Malbim learns differently. That he's being moichiachem even on tasting it. He wasn't concerned about the fact that people are going to waste time cooking the food. His kavana was on the idui and the tzom l'shem Hashem. who is noisel ayoiv koyach. So in that case, even te'ima would be usher. Pasuk Chavtes. Vayomer Yonatan, Achar avi et haaretz. Rashi says, Bilbel et datem ves Yeshuasem kamayim achurim. My father didn't do correct. He confused you. And he ruined the Yeshua. By making you weak, by not allowing you to eat, we could have had a greater victory. Ru'una ki oru ene. Look at how light has come back into my eyes. Ki ta'amti ma'ad dvash hazeh. If the people would have been allowed to eat from the spoils, we would have been able to destroy them completely. And now we haven't destroyed them completely. Now,
Is he being Morid B'Malchus?
so let's unpack this a little bit. Yonatan is understanding that he thought that the Shavua of Shaul, that they shouldn't eat, was that they're going to waste time preparing their food, otherwise they would be chasing the enemy. It's good that I tasted a little bit because I got more strength. And he claims they wouldn't be mizbatel cooking because they would have found a lot of food from the shalal. That they would, from the spoils. And therefore the Makkah and the Plishtim would have been much greater. Now, like Ellen asked, Yesh litmo al divrei Yonatan. We must have wonder in Yonatan's words. How could Yonatan speak like this against, number one, his father, who's the king? Can he argue with his father, the king? So, the Iyeh Hayam wants to say that Yonatan's taina was correct. Soldiers are supposed to eat. Like we're going to learn in the Rambam, Hilchos Malachim. The Jewish army that goes into the borders of the non-Jew, and they destroy them, and take prisoners from the Goyim. Jewish soldiers are allowed to eat non-kosher things. Im yirav, if they are starving, if they don't have kosher food with them. The Kesef Mishnah, the Beis Yosef, who's the main Meforish of the Rambam, says, the af belisa konas nefashos muter lem lechol dvar masurim, ilesham dvar mutorim. Even without sakon nefashos, they can eat dvar masurim if there's not dvarim that are mutorim. So certainly, Yonatan might have been correct that it was improper to asher them from eating, because that's how the halacha is paskin. Now, the Shulchan Aruch in Yoreh Deah regarding kavod of a rav or a chacham says mutar lachlok alav be'ezeb psak or ra'ah im yesh l'rayis v'chachol dvarav shadinimo. You're allowed to argue with your Rebbe if you have proofs that what you're saying is correct. It sounds like Yonatan had rayas to psak like him against what his father had said.
Ernie, can I add something that the Mayam Loe says? He says the Chazal learned from what Yonatan did, that there are two examples where you're not allowed to fast. One is a besieged city where people they combine tefillah with tzom. You're not allowed to do that. From this, we learn that. And the other is pidyon shvuim. If you're trying to free a captive, you're not allowed to fast. You need your strength for those. Both of those things, it's learned from this pasuk where Yonatan was correct in what he did.
I was going to bring from the Sefer Chasidim, where he says, "Kishemekitim goyim esa'ir," when there's a siege, a mesanim, and you can't fast. Lo yicholim l'lach v'chein misha homich lito shvuyim lo yisanim. So the Mayam must be taking it from the Sefer Chasidim, because I have that source as well. Very
Sorry
good.
to preempt you.
Okay, so Pasuk Lamed Aleph, Vayakuba Yamahu Baplishtim Michna Shayalona Vayafa Amaod. And they did do bad. The people defeated the Plishtim. The people were very tired. Vayat Ha'am El Hashalal. The people moved rapidly towards the spoils. So the Metzudas Sion says Vayifnu or Vayimaru, they turned to them or they went quickly to them. Some say it means Vispazru Lakan, they scattered here and there because they were very hungry. Vaikhut Sonuvakar, they took sheep and cattle, uvnei vakar, vaishchatu arza. They shechted, but they shechted improperly. They shechted towards the ground. Therefore, vayochala am aladam. Now, there is a 5 or 6 way machlokas that we're going to explain how the Rishonim learn this. What kind of ched happened here? Rashi says, Sheshachtu oso vespino. Look at Rashi, Tzono Vakar, Omer Ani, Ze oso vespino lo sishchatu b'yom echad. You're not allowed to shecht a parent and the child on the same day. So according to Rashi, that's what they did. That's why they were called choitim. But Rabotenu amru b'shchitas kodshim, shoy magdishim shom shlomim v'ochuf nezrika sadam. Rashi, in the name of Chazal, say that these were animals that were already sanctified to be a korban, like a shlomim. Now, the process of a korban is you have to shecht it, you have to collect the dam in a vessel, you have to then sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach. Only then are you allowed to eat the meat. If you eat the meat before the zrika sadam, that's an aveira. And Rashi is quoting Chazal that that's the avera that they did here. They ate the meat before the zrika sadam because this was not chulin. Chulin, non-kosher meat, you can shecht and you can eat. You have to salt the meat. You got to make sure the blood drains and salt it, and then you can eat it. You don't need, there's no zrika sadam by chulin. That's only by kosher. Now, the Radak explains that this is the Rashi is bringing a Chazal. It's only according to those opinions that normally when we shecht a korban, you can only do it in the daytime. There's no shechita after shkiyas achama. We're going to see very soon the psukim. It's going to prove that we're talking about nighttime right now. So how could they shecht kodshim at night? Well, because this was a bamas yachid. Remember, we're in this period of time where the Mishkan is in Nov and Givon, in that 57-year period where it's permitted to shecht on a bama. Well, the rules of a bama are different, as we've seen many times. One of the different rules is that you can shecht kodshim at night on a bamas yachid. So the Radak gives another pshat. They were so hungry that they they shechted with the animal on the ground, and therefore the blood didn't drain properly. It was still absorbed in the meat. So when they ate the meat, they ate the dam. The Kliyakar says, a shechita knife has to be a certain length. And they didn't use the shechita knife that was the right length. And we'll see that Shaul will correct this. So you can see there's a machlokas harishonim exactly what sin Bnei Yisrael committed here. The Ramban in Vayikra Yud Tes in Kedoshim mentions this episode and says, "Hayu oichlim min abehema kodim shetetzei nafsha." Something else. They ate from the meat before the animal had died. That's why it says Vayata Amela Shalal. They were running. Shuka ayat hadores, and ayat is like a falcon or a hawk that sort of attacks and eats before it even eats its prey live. Because it's like Avram and Achai. The Ramban gives a different pshat, that this was some kind of kishuf or ksomim. There was some kind of magic going on here. That they would sort of collect the blood in a ditch. They thought that the demons would gather there. Because remember, Bnei Yisrael were there with Shaul. They were very afraid of the Plishtim. Remember, Shaul didn't do anything without the Urim V'Tumim. And therefore the people also were asking oracles and shadim and kishuth. And that's why oichlim al adam lasoisa maisahu. That's the way the Ramban learns. The Ralbag says, ochlu abasar samuch la'adam. You're not, lo yisachlu al adam, they shouldn't even be near the blood when they eat. So, multiple pshatim as to what exactly Aver they committed when it says that they ate on the dam. So, Pasuk Lamed Gimel, Vayagidu l'Shaul le'mor. They told Shaul, Hinei ha'am chotim la'Hashem lechol al adam. They told Shaul, the people are eating, they're sinning, they're eating al adam. Vayomer begadatem, you are traitors. And he told them, Golu elai hayom even gedola. Roll to me a big stone. Now, what is the point of this big stone? So first of all, Rashi says, Mibod yom. Here it seems to say it's in the daytime. Ulamata, later on in the next pasuk it says, Vayagshu ishar biyado alayla. So Rabosenu nechleku bedavar b'sof Masechtas Zvachim. The Machlokes Chazal in Masechtas Zvachim. Yesh ben pirshu kan b'chulin kan b'kodshim. Again, like we said before, there's a debate whether it was kodshim or chulin. Chulin you can shecht at night as long as you have a torch and you can see what you're doing. Kodshim can only be shecht in the daytime. V'yesh ben pirshu kan b'kodshim shehuk t'shuli kar b'bamas nov gedola. That an animal that already been designated to be offered in Nov, where the Mizbeach was, that could only be shecht in the daytime. Kan b'kodshim shehuk t'shuli kar b'bamas ketana, which we learned, according to the most poskim, that you can shecht already at night in a bamas yachid. Limas olas yachid sheksher li shachid balayla. So what's this Evan Gedola, says Rashi? Asa bama. He made one of these private mizbeachs, lizrok alei adam v'ekter chlovim, because he's going along with the pshat of Rashi that the avera was that they ate from the meat before zrika sadam. Well, they need a mizbeach, so he needed an Evan to make a mizbeach. But that's going to lead to a number of questions. It seems like the point of the Evan was that if they're going to eat meat, he wants to do it without sinning. So he made it a bama in order to do Zrika Saddam, and then to also, after you do the Zrika Saddam, the innards, the chaylev, al-aksalim, and the various fats also have to be offered on the mizbeach. But that can be done. You have to do the Zrika Saddam, and then you can eat the meat. Then you have to burn the emurim. However, says the Iyei Hayam, Ikar atikun aita dekevan de loasa kol ish la'atzmo. By now centralizing the activity, Shaul is going to do it for everybody. Nasa hakol b'tzibur tachas pikucho shel Shaul. Shaul's going to be like the mashgiach. So there's not going to be any avera over all these various Yisurim that could have been involved there. Each one according to their shita. According to Rashi, not to shecht osov es beno, the parent and the child, to do the zrikas adam right away, and to only eat the meat after the zrikas adam. Like the Radak said that by shechting on the stone, the blood will run away from the meat, and they'll be able to eat the meat without the blood in it. Or, like the Kli Yakar said, they're going to be able to use the right sakin, the right knife for the shechita. The Kli Yakar says that Shaul HaMelech himself wanted to shecht, and that's why they brought a big event to make it easy for him. Now, just one kasha I want to discuss. That according to the pshat, that he was going to use this Evan as a mizbeach so that they could do this Rika Saddam, the question is the following. How was Shaul allowed to do that? There's a pasuk in the Torah that says, Lo takim lecha matzeva asher saneh Hashem lokecha. Rashi says there, this is in Dvorim Tet Zayin, matzeva even achat. So you cannot build a mizbeach from one stone. Afilu l'shamayim. So not just avodah zarah, but even l'shamayim. So if it's true that Shaul put up this stone as a mizbeach, how could he do so? You're not allowed to build a mizbeach out of one stone. So the Even Ezra says that aver is only for avodah zarah, but for shechting l'shamayim you could do one stone. The Rambam says a matzeva is not an even like Rashi said, but a binyan, a building that everybody gathers there, and this wasn't like that. But according to Rashi, we still have a problem. Who said you're not allowed to build one stone? So the Das Soifrim answers that yes, they brought Shaul one stone, but that was just the yesod of the mizbech, and he built other stones on top of it. He didn't do the mizbech on one stone. The Pardes Yosef says that they broke that one stone into multiple stones, and then they built the mizbech. Pasuk Lamed Daled. Let me just see what I have here. 1 second. I just want to bring what the Musar Nevi'im says. Masha achlu bnei Yisrael azal. Why did bnei Yisrael do this? Nira shezeu mishum shechashvu shemuter b'shas milchama lechol kol dvar masurim. They had learned the Rambam very well, that when they're in the war, you can eat whatever you want. Like it says in the Rambam, Melachim halach chalutze tzava kishikansu b'gvul ha'akum muter lechol nevelus u'treifos u'bsar chazir and everything. Aval heim ta'u b'zeh. That's all. The Rambam says very clearly that's only if you find yourself on the territory of the Akum. This was going on in Eretz Yisrael. And also, dvarim heterim. The kanarei of shaya lechem lechol beteira. They didn't have patience to eat properly and to follow the proper halach. Pasuk Lamed Daled. Vayomer Shaul putzu ba'am. Spread out among the people. V'amartem lahem hagishu elai isha ro v'isyeu. Everybody bring me your ox and your sheep. Ushchatetem bazeh v'achaltem. And you will shecht with this, at this place. Or, Rashi says, sakin badak lehem. The din is, by shchita, you're supposed to show the shchita knife to the moira da'asr of the city. So Shaul is the moira da'asr, they have to show the knife to him. He has to check the knife. And the Gemara in Chulin says, Amrav Chizda minayin livdika sakin, koydem hashchita min ha-Torah, shenem ushchatetem bazeh v'achaltem. From this pasuk, Imashma she'er alehem be'ezeh sakin lishchot, he showed them what shchita knife to use. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, if the shchita knife has little scratches in it and indents, and you shecht, so you're going to tear the simonim, and therefore the shchita will be puzzle. So you have to have a very sharp knife. Got to be checked. You take your fingernail and you run it on top of the knife to make sure that it doesn't drop into one of the indents. Not only that, it's got to be of course, you got to check the knife. Otherwise, you're going to make a hole in the esophagus. It'll be a treif. So the Gemara says, "L'chacham kamrinon shetzorech laharos v'loy dai b'bdikas adam ragil." It's not enough to a regular person check. The chacham has to check it. Okay.
Ernie, can I add something here?
Please.
The word bazeh, Bez, Zayin, Hayes, Gematria 14,
Right,
which is exactly the 14 finger breaths long that the sakin has to be.
Right.
Where is it written?
Right. It says like this. Is it like this? Yesh oimrim shetziva bazeh shakol yishchutus be'anto leben azayidei shol. Yesh oimrim shetziva lam lishchot bazeh the sakin kazeh sheyesh lo shir shul yud dal detzbos 14 finger breaths. The bepachos mizeh lo yo'ilu. Some people say Rashi Radak Rabag that he showed them where on the neck you should do the shechita. And some say he showed them how to check the shechita knife, like we learned in Chulin. Also, we learned that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives schar l'mafreya. That means, if you remember, last week we learned that the police team had confiscated all the metal from the Jewish people. Nobody had swords. But then all of a sudden, through a nace, Shaul and Yonatan had swords. So this is an example of HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving schar l'mafreya. The swords were given to him before the battle, because of the fact that Shaul was so careful now with shechita and with all the mitzvahs of what he's doing now. He gave him a reward backwards, even before the Ma'aser. Pasuk Lamed Hey. Vayiven Shaul mizbeach l'Hashem, oso echel livnos mizbeach l'Hashem. This was the first Zaya mizbeach harishon shebona Shaul shekol mizbechos hakadmot shezavach l'mayu bnuyos michvar. We had other examples where Shaul made korbanos, but those had been drilled before. This was the first mizbeach that a Melech Yisrael built. That's what the Navi Shmuel says. Right. So the Midbar Rabbah says, "V'lo kama mizbachos bana rishonim." Why all of a sudden it's like the first mizbech ever built? Noach bona mizbeach, Avram bona mizbeach, Yitzchak bona mizbeach, Yaakov bona mizbeach, Moshe bona mizbeach, Yoshua bona mizbeach. And now you say, Oto echel ivno mizbeach Lashem. So Rav Yosi Omer echel b'malach. He was the first king. And Rav Yudin says, L'fi shenosa nafsho la'davar shel shchita. You see how much effort Shaul put in to make sure they did Hilchos Shchita properly, which is the Tzarech HaMizbeach. Therefore, the Torah sort of made it like his was the real one. Lamed Vav. Vayomer Shaul ner dachrei Plishtim Laila. Let's chase after the Plishtim at night. V'navoza b'hem ad or boker. We should chase after them until the morning. V'lo nashar b'hem ish. We shouldn't leave a person left. Vayomru kol atov b'nech aseh. Vayomer HaKohen nikirva lo mal Elohim. The Kohen who had the Urim V'Tumim brought the Urim V'Tumim close. Vayishal Shaul b'Elohim. Shaul asked the Urim V'Tumim, Ha'ered achrei Plishtim? Should I chase after them? Hatitneim b'yad Yisrael? Will they fall in our hands? V'lo anau b'yomahu. The Urim V'Tumim was silent. Now, when the Urim V'Tumim doesn't answer, there must be a problem. So Vayomer Shaul go shalom kol pinasam, bring me the whole people. What is the sin that is leading the Urim V'Tumim not to answer me? Now, many Meforshim say, why didn't he just assume that it was because the Bnei Yisrael were eating on the dam, like we said, that they were choitim? Because Shaul himself called them bagadatem. So, Evin Shaul shayachet shekara hayom. This is something that happened right now. Not because of the chet that they did before. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu already did the big tshuah with the Milchama Keneged HaPlishtim. But the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says, he saw in the Urim V'Tumim, Kol ha'tiliyot shel kol ha'shvatim shem avikim ubotim shel Shevet Binyamin Yoshokim levzel otala davar b'Yisrael. He saw that Shevet Binyamin, there's something wrong with Shevet Binyamin in the Urim V'Tumim, because those letters stood out. So, Pasuk Lamed Tes. Ki chai Hashem, HaMoshe et Yisrael. Ki im yeshno b'Yonatan b'ni kimot yamut. Whoever is going to be identified as the sinner, even if it would be my son. He's not talking about his son yet, but he made a shvuah that even if it was my son, he'll be put to death. Ve'eino ne'ami kol. Nobody answered. So they made a goyrol. Rashi says, "La'pil goyrol." They were going to do a lottery. Vayomel kol Yisrael atem tiyu le'ever echad, v'ani v'Yonatan b'ni niyeh le'ever echad. You, Klal Yisrael, will be on one side, and me and Yonatan will be on the other side. Vayomru amel Shaul atov b'nech aseh. Whatever you want, do. Mem Aleph. Vayomer Shaul Hashem, Elokei Yisrael hava tamim. Vayilaked Yonatan v'Shaul v'am yatzau. And the goyrel fell on Yonatan. Vayomer Shaul apilu b'nyu. Oh, I guess Klal Yisrael versus them, and Yonatan v'Shaul were chosen. Vayomer Shaul apilu b'nyu ben Yonatan b'ni v'ilaked Yonatan. Then they made a goyrel between Yonatan and Shaul, and the goyrel chose Yonatan. Vayomer Shaul Yonatan agida li ma'asita. Shaul said to his son, "What did you do?" Vayagid lo Yonatan. Vayomer ta'om ta'amti. I tasted b'ktzeh matar shebiyadi ma'at vashi ner amud. I'm ready to be killed. Vayomer Shaul ko yaseh Elokim v'ko yosif ki mot tamut Yonatan. So shall it be, and my son Yonatan will be put to death. Very dramatic picture here. Now, some say The Me'am Loez says that Shaul knew that it was Yonah's son who did it because somebody had told him. That's why he chose Yonatan right away. The Das Soifrim says he only mentioned Yonatan to show that he was going to be impartial. Even if the lottery came on my son, I would carry out whatever happens. Now, how can you rely on a goyrel? The din is you don't put somebody to death without to aid him. So there's Chavis Yair says that, for example, we see that there were times that the girl worked. Yonah, right? They when Yonah tried to escape, they did a girl and Yonah, and they threw Yonah over the ship, and the storm went away. Haman also did a goyrel. So there are those that hold that you can be soymech on a girl, and those that hold that you can't be soymech on a girl.
What does it mean when it says v'yifdu ha'am es Yonah's son below mace?
No, we're not. I didn't read that pasuk yet.
Oh, okay.
No, I purposely stopped. I just read Mem Daled.
Oh, okay.
We have not done Mem Daled yet. Right
Okay.
now,
Sorry.
it looks like Shaul has condemned his son to die. And most of the poskim say that this psak of Shaul was midin malchus, like the yesh koch lemelech, laharog ula'anosh afilu b'lei edim v'asra de lo kabesdin. It's din malchus. Beis Din, of course, has to rely on edim, but not the melech. That which Shaul did with the Urim V'Tumim and the girl, he wanted to show that it was really Yonatan that deserved it. The question is, I thought we had these excuses for Yonatan. Why was Yonatan Chayv Misa? He didn't know at the time. He was a shogeg. He didn't know that his father had made a shvuah. That's number one. And he also didn't eat. Remember, he just tasted. And then if he was pikuach nefesh, he's pikuach nefesh. The din is shekol melech b'Yisrael osaheg gdolei b'maymin kol Yisrael sheyesh lo meshutz b'mishpatim im yachrimu al ir lachem. If they make a cherem, an excommunication, however, alav chayv misa. And that's why the Anshe Yavesh Gila that we learned before were put to death. And his father had said, Ko yaselu kim ko yosif kimot tamut Yonatan. And that's the source where he was Chayv Misa. Even so, let's read the next, before we read the next pasuk, 1 second. Yeah, it's on the next pasuk. Memhei. Vayomer ha'am el Shaul. Hayonatan yamut asher asa Yeshua gdolah zot b'Yisrael. The whole Yeshua came with Yonatan. Remember, Yonatan started the war, and they won all. He started everything. Chalila Chay Hashem im yipol misaras rosho artza. Chalila, if one hair should drop from his head. Ki melokim asa yom hazeh. Vayivdu ha'amet Yonatan v'lo meid. And they made Shaul matir the shvua, like you can be matir neder. So Shaul undid the shvua, and Yonatan was not killed. Every Motzei Shabbos, we read this pasuk. We talk about all sorts of positive things, and when we talk about Pidyon, we talk about the fact that the Klal Yisrael were able to be podeh Yonatan's life. Amra'am l'shol, Adonenu HaMelech, Shgogahi. He was a shogeg. V'ikrivu alav korban oila shegaso v'neter lo v'domi moves. They were makriv a korban olah, and that redeemed him. So the question is, if indeed Yonatan was a shogeg, why indeed was Shaul not answered by the Urim V'Tumim? So the Pirkei Rav Eliezer is mashma, because they hadn't been makriv that korban yet on the shogeg. Once they would have been, if they would have been makriv the korban and he was nimchal, then it would have been, the Urim V'Tumim would have worked. But since the shogeg chet was still there, it didn't work. However, Rabbeinu Sadia Hagon is mafarish differently. That the reason why Kodesh Baruch Hu did not answer Shaul, to prove to the people that in Hanami, Yonasan was a shogeg. Because they might have, if it wasn't for that, they would have said, oh, you know, the reason Yonatan is not being killed is because he's Shaul's son. So it was all one effort by Kodesh Baruch Hu to prove that indeed Yonatan was a shogeg. So the question goes back the following. If it turns out that Yonatan was not a sinner, why did the goyrel fall on Yonatan? He went Arei lo chata klal. Nira loymar she'av shloi avar lacherem haval harei amru b'tainis vayikhu even vayasimu tachtav. Remember Moshe Rabbeinu, when they were fighting Amalek, when his hands were up, the Bnei Israel were winning. When his hands were down, they were losing. So what did they do? They put 2 stones under Moshe's hands. Moshe karachas leishav aleh. Well, he didn't have a pillow. No, Moshe Rabbeinu knew Klal Yisrael was fighting for their lives and are in tsar. Afani ayem and b'tzar. So he took up stones, not a pillow. Mikan sha'af tzadik gomer tzarich lishtatef matzibur. So kan arechet Yonatan b'zeh shebizman shekol ha'ayim hayushrim b'tzar lo tama me'uma. What was the rest of Klal Yisrael? They were fasting. They didn't have anything. Lo haylo lefrosh from that tzibur. By tasting the honey, he shouldn't have separated from the tzibur. V'haya b'zeh ninan shel chilul Hashem. V'chein efshar haya l'chol ha'am lifdosus Yonasan mishum debizman sheim matzu shu lo haya asham b'zeh ve'en v'shem chod ha'rei ein b'zeh shum chilul Hashem ve'en klal shum makom la'nisha. There's no reason to punish him at all. So there might have been a shemetz problem with Yonatan because he was not sharui b'tzar the way Moshe Rabbeinu was sharui b'tzar along with the rest of Klal Yisrael. Also, some say because he was noigea b'kvad hamelech by opposing him, so he had a little chet involved in him. Pasuk mem vayal shalabach plishtim uplishtim achulim koma. He did not destroy the plishtim. Unfortunately, 2 years later, they're going to come back, and unfortunately, Shaul and we know what's going to happen to Shaul and Yonasan. So this was not the time for the final destruction of plishtim. V'Shaul hakadam luchal Yisrael. In fact, Shaul will sort of forced the Maluch on Yisrael. He battled the Moab of the Ammon of the Edom, of this is in the future. That's talking about eventually he's going to be asked to fight Amalek. Next week, I'm going to talk about what it means here when it says "Uv'chol asher yifnei Yarshia." There's some midrashim I want to do there before we move. Wherever he turned, he inspired terror, is how they explain V'chol asher yifnei yarshia. But there's a very important medrash that we're going to learn about that. Vayuvnei, let's just finish the parak. Vayuvnei shol Yonatan, the Yishvi, who's Ish Boshes, Umakishua v'shem shnei dvotav shem abchira Meirav v'shem aktana Michal. Right? We know what's going to happen to Michal. V'shem Eshes Shaul, the wife of Shaul is Achinoam bas Achimatz. V'shem Shar Tzva'o Aviner ben Ner Dod Shaul. Ner was Aviner was Shaul's uncle. Right, Shaul ben Kish. Ner was, yeah. V'ner haya dod Shaul, achiv shel Kish. Aviner, no, Ner was the brother of Kish. Ushnei b'nei Aviel. V'Kish avishol v'ner Avner ben Aviel. Batiyah melchama chazak al plishtim kol yemei Shaul. It was the battle was strong with the plishtim. V'rashol kol ish gibor v'chol ben chai v'yasvei elav. He started gathering all the strong soldiers to build a big army. So we will start Perek Tesvav next week, but we will finish some of the midrashim that I didn't finish that I want to mention before we move on to Tesvav. Any comments about what we learned tonight, or ha'aros, or
Is